Pretty boys with tattoos and a main character who sticks up for herself and doesn't take shit from anybody is what this manga is about. Now the larger framing is that these two come from the biggest Yakuza crime families, and to broker peace between them, they have to pretend to be in a relationship for about a year. For that to happen, our girl moves to Tokyo to live with him during her last year of high school, and everybody is kind to her there, and her fiancé is a surprisingly very nice dude, and everything is going great until he snaps and he reveals he's a fucking psychopath who's hungry for violence and chaos and is actively looking for people to be mean to him because on top of everything else, he's a masochist. Now here your average gal would have tapped out, but since that's definitely not Yoshino, she finds a way to stick up for herself and put this fuckface in his place, and that's when he falls in love with her, because he needs somebody with a spine to completely ruin his life, which is what he's into. And from there they try to figure out what to do with their relationship while going through different trials and tribulations. The start of the manga, which I kind of summed up for you, is so fun. It completely subverts the expectations we would have of a nice male romantic interest and a reserved girl protagonist. It's a huge part of the plot, and I'd say it's pretty balanced with the other aspects of the story. During every arc, their relationship is actively developing alongside everything else, and after an arc we get a more in-depth conversation between them, or just, an emotionally intimate moment. Now when it comes to those, sometimes they can develop the relationship further or just place seeds for development in the future, and other times they're just undermined as a comedy bit where this dude says something insane and our girl goes, "What are you talking about, you fucking idiot?" and the chapter ends. And honestly, that doesn't feel too good, but for the most part, the relationship and how it slowly develops over time is great. In fact, it's such a strong hook that the whole experience kind of exclusively relies on that to be interesting. Everything else is a bit lackluster, and by that I mean the Yakuza politics, the fights, and most of the other characters are not good and feel like they're there to fill out the space in between the bonding moments. And yeah, I guess they kinda have to be there for the good pacing, but man, they could have been a little more interesting, because if something extreme is not happening and we're not spending time developing the relationship, I found myself getting distracted and starting to read every other word, because occasionally the manga just feels like filler. The worst offender of that is the Osaka arc, where we introduce a couple of unimportant characters and we have a very tedious build-up for a not really great payoff. Also, there we have more slice of life moments, and while some of them are pretty good, others just fail to be interesting in any way. Only in that part of the story do we get so many random details. I don't need a wall of text of them talking about lunch, and I love Yoshino, but I don't care that she misses the taste of brown rice. Why is this an information I have to spend time learning? You know what, here I think I'm getting concentrated on a aspect of the manga that's not really that important. My general point is that there is a bit of a low point after the first major arc, and then everything picks up again. It's just weird. The pacing in there is weird. That's it. I will talk about the fights and the other characters later in the video, but to skim over the Yakuza, in general they're just not a selling point. The author themselves says that they're meant to be campy and not a realistic depiction of actual crime life, so it doesn't feel fair to criticize the manga for not checking those boxes of, crime being an active and engaging part of the story, but still it feels important to mention that the Yakuza are a mainly convenient plot device to move the story forward. Also, there are a couple of scenarios kinda poking fun at the whole organized crime thing, which can be pretty funny sometimes. Any manga that runs for a while will see some changes to its art style, it's only normal. But the evolution of just the artistic integrity in here is crazy. Putting a panel from the very first chapter to one from the latest one is honestly just jarring. It's insane, the progress is insane. Now that's in part because it looks really good now, and in part because it looked pretty rough at the start. Even in the cooler panels you can tell that the proportions were a little off, and that the heavy lifting was done by the vibe and the backgrounds. And just looking at some of these panels, they're so bad, they're just fun to look at. but that does come with a bit of a drawback, that it takes you out of the manga. Because, for example, Kirishima is supposed to be this tough, scary gang dude, and then you see his side profile and he's built like a fucking plank, which doesn't do him justice because he has abs and everything, but just the panel before we see that, he looks so damn goofy. It robs him of all of the intimidating, insane, psychotic vibes we're looking for here. But I will say that the goofiness helps with Yoshino and all the weird faces she makes, which is a very charming part of the manga that I'm glad is still there even with the more detailed art style we have now. I guess this is a good time to go over the fights, which at the start look very cartoony and almost alternative, because the fights are illustrated in some interesting ways because the author is trying to avoid drawing hand-to-hand combat, because probably they knew they weren't that great at it. And as the manga continues, we start seeing longer, more hands-on fights, which look pretty stiff. And it kinda just stays there in this awkward action limbo. In the most recent chapters, there is a slight improvement, but even with that, I'd say we have just now arrived at the acceptable minimum quality to call these fights average. Now that may sound a little harsh, but that's just how it is. And luckily we don't read this for the action, we read it for the handsome dudes. Now I have nothing against these sexy fellas, they're cool to look at, but that element of them is a little too amped up at times. By that I mean they have some place in the story, but we go out of our way to put them in the narrative as other romantic interests, which, and I hate to break the fourth wall here, is there probably for the fan base, because they have to have different ships and different favorite dudes, because that's a classic move for anything romance. And I'm all for it, but this just feels a little too forced at times. Apart from that, maybe there are like 2-3 other cool characters that don't get too much screen time, and everybody else is either irrelevant or not interesting. This leaves us with the two highlights of the manga. First of which is Yoshino, who as a character has a spine, which avoids the age-old experience of getting frustrated at the protagonist of your romance, which is too much of a coward to move the story forward and get what they want. And our girl knows what she wants and she gets it, and it's fucking great. And she carries this whole narrative almost as much as this guy over here. He's such a unique character. The fact that he has a laundry list of fucked up shit. The fact that he is actually unpredictable, not only for the characters in the story, but for us the readers, or at least me when I was reading this, because I felt like half of the time I had no idea what he actually knows or what he's going to do. It's genuinely so fun to observe him, and don't even get me started on the push and pull dynamic of, oh yeah, he really is a caring dude, and alright, he is fucking insane. It just keeps the manga fresh almost all the time. Now with that said, they are both very surface level characters. I've seen more in-depth psychopaths and I've seen more in-depth female characters with a spine. What makes these two interesting is that, they are themselves, and that they exist in this very specific genre and in this very specific setting. It feels important to mention here that this manga has been going on for a while, and it has a very weird chapter structure. Let's just, for convenience, say it has 40 chapters out there. Some of them are 20 pages, some of them are 60, I don't know. My point here is that these 40 chapters have been released in the time span of 7 years. And in the same way that impacted the art, it has to have impacted the story or just the general vision that the author had. Because after reading the current chapters, I have a hard time trying to figure out how is the story supposed to develop from here, and I feel like the author is having a hard time with that as well. So considering all that and the underwhelming aspects of the manga and all the good, well-structured things about it, everything kinda evens out at a pretty average experience. But I did have fun reading it, and it does have some fresh ideas, which for me puts it up a notch at about a light 6. That could have been a little higher, but after reading chapter 38, I was left with some very mixed feelings, and I'm not gonna talk about it here, because this video is already late and I don't need more stuff to edit, but if you wanna talk about it, I'll be in the comments and on our Discord server. so feel free to join us there. These are the next 2 mangas I'll be reviewing next. If any of them seem interesting, you can read ahead of time, maybe anticipate to review. You can do that. I am like this close to figuring out the review structure. I know this is late. I'm trying to get there. Okay, next one I got it. Next couple videos I'll really nail it down. So let's fucking... I will get it. I will get it eventually. So see you then.